o'clock, and this workshop is in session.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for accommodating us on this rescheduled budget workshop. This is, as I said last time at our last workshop, this is very preliminary. That's why it's unofficial draft, because the proposed budget comes out at the end of this month. And so these are just really exchange of conversation and ideas about what should be included or not included in the budget, so that when we do put the proposed budget out, it reflects some of the things perhaps that you'd like to see. So today we're covering the utility fund, or the water and sewer fund, the capital funds, and then we also have a third item on your agenda, any other funds. So if there's some follow-up items from even your last budget workshop that you want to bring up, this is a time to do that as well. So really any budget-related item for next fiscal year can be talked about today. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Amy like we have in the past, and she and I are going to kind of tag team this. If you have a question along the way, just stop us, and we'll take the question as it comes up, okay?
It's better to stop you than to do it then.
Well, I think so, because you all have the PowerPoint. You can kind of see what we're going to cover. If it's going to be covered later on in the PowerPoint, then you might want to wait for your question. But when you have the thought, yeah, please let us know what your thought is. That'd be great. Okay.
All right. We'll get started. Thank y'all for being here, and thanks for your flexibility with the reschedule. Really appreciate that. This is going to be a similar format to the way the first budget workshop worked. So I put an updated PowerPoint at each of your places. It's basically the same as what you received before. I changed the dates on it to reflect the new date, changed the calendar, that kind of thing. So, but anyway, what you have at your place is what's showing up on the board. And so I'm going to go through the PowerPoint, and then the PowerPoint will refer to the detail in your budget book. And so we'll go through to some of those pages as we flip through. Let's see. All right, so just to recap what Mark went over, we're going to start with looking at the calendar and process, then go into the water sewer fund, and then a lot of other funds. So there's a lot to cover this morning, and we will go ahead and get started. All right, looking at the PowerPoint of the calendar, you can see that we are now at step 2, which is the second budget workshop. And we still have a lot of steps to accomplish between now and the end of September. Things are pretty tight. There's a lot of legal requirements of when we have to have, what done and when everything has to be published and announced, and multiple hearings, that kind of thing. So, so as we've talked about before, it is pretty imperative that we follow this calendar closely. And if there are things that that you want to discuss or you have questions about, the earlier the better for sure, and please let us know. So we will move on. All right, we're going to start with water and sewer fund. So just to give you a brief overview of the water and sewer fund, it's our second largest fund, general fund of course being the largest. We are proposing a balanced budget with $12.6 million in revenues and expenditures. This includes rate increases on both water and sewer, and I do have a detailed slide about that, so if y'all have questions, we'll wait till we get to the detailed slide on the rate increases. It also includes a full year of estimated revenues from our expanded reuse customers. It includes debt service for the Legion lift station loan. Our largest expense category is this debt service transfer. We'll get into some more detail on that as we go through as well. That largest actual departments are water production and water reclamation. Like we did with the general fund, we're going to focus at this workshop on changes and new items. And like the last workshop, as we go through, we'll just refer to pages in your book for further detail. All right, so water and sewer revenues. Those can be found on pages 15 through 22 of your book. And looking at the pie graph, you can see that water is the biggest piece of the revenue pie, followed closely by sewer. And once again, we're estimating reuse customers with a whole year of revenue. One thing that's interesting to note is fiscal year 2017 was an average rainfall year, 0.09 off the 86-year average for the rainfall total. So we've kind of recalibrated our water sales model to use 2017 as our average year, as a base year. So anyway, going forward, that's what we're looking at. To get into a little bit more detail on revenues, if you will go to page 16 or look at this slide here, we're going to talk about rates to start with. So what we are proposing is a 4% increase on the volumetric part of the water rate and a 2% increase on the volumetric part of the sewer rate. Looking at this graph here, we have a comparison to other cities. A few things to note. We're looking at, on this graph, a comparison of 8,000 gallons as an average. I think that 8,000 gallons is something that the state had put out years ago of kind of an average comparison. But really, that 8,000 gallon customer would be irrigating for the most part. There's not many people that reach 8,000 gallons if they're not irrigating some. Looking at our actual data, just a residential only customer that doesn't have any irrigation is more like 5,800 gallons per month. So as far as how much this will impact customers, so with this 8,000 gallon comparison, the average bill would increase $1.84 in 2019 from what their current bill is.
Per month.
Per month, yes, per month. And looking at that in terms of other points, the 5,800 a month, average user, that would be an increase of $1.31 per month. And then if we looked at something like a 2,000 gallon per month user, that might be someone who lives alone, something like that, that would be an 81-cent increase per month. So I think it's important to note when you're talking about increases, people might think, well, my bill is $100, so if you're going up 4% on water and 2% on sewer, that's going to be $6 more on my bill. But it doesn't work like that because we're not looking at a base fee increase, and we're just looking at increases on the volumetric piece of water and sewer. And this doesn't include the garbage piece of it. So when you break it down like that, you can't just take your total bill and multiply by a percentage.
I have a question. What is
Yes, sir.
What's the 4%? What are we trying to reach? We're trying to reach another $250,000 in revenue?
Let's see. I'd have to do. I could do some math on that and tell you exactly.
I was just curious what those numbers would be.
Yeah, we're looking at. Let's see. I don't have that
What's the
note here.
purpose of
Chasing
it?
debt cap,
We're
doing?
part of it relates to debt, obviously, because we are adding to the debt, such as we are adding the Legion Lift Station debt service in 2019. It's also important to note, though, that our operations costs are increasing every year. We're increasing our salary costs every year. We have increases in chemical costs, increases in maintenance costs. The last rate increase we did, we had an increase on the base rate on October 1st, 2016. But as far as the volumetric piece of it, the last time we increased that rate was October 1st, 2012. And the last time we increased the sewer portion of the volumetric was October 1st, 2011. So we've had increased operational expenses every year, but we have not been increasing our rates. Looking at this comparison graph, what I've done here is the bar with the orange around it on the far right-hand side is where Kerrville is right now in 2018. And then you can see the other bars with the orange around them are where we would go with rate increases over the next few years. And I'm comparing us to other cities in our area of where their current rates are. That would be assuming that they're not going to increase their rates, that they're just going to leave their rates alone. And that certainly isn't what we're seeing. Last year, 6 of the 10 comparison cities here had rate increases. Most have not announced what their plans are for 19 yet, but there are two, Saws and Pflugerville, who already have announced rate increases for 19. And Saws is a 4.7% increase and Pflugerville is a 6.2% increase. And I assume some of these other ones will have rate increases as well. They just don't have that out there on their websites yet.
We would be raising our rates even if we didn't add the Legion debt, would we not? Aren't we really chasing debt that we already have on the books?
I think it's a blend of all of that.
Right.
It's a system that you look at all your costs.
Right.
It's definitely a component, our existing debt. But remember, we refinanced or refunded the existing debt, which helped tremendously. Otherwise, we were looking at a 6% increase in water rates. And so we were able to reduce that to 4.
I may be jumping ahead, but I'm just looking at the effluent numbers. We're expecting $140,000 in revenue, and our debt service is $800,000. Why are we not going after those rates?
Those are, most of all that's
Contract,
contracted.
yeah. And we'll
That's a-
get to the reuse in a minute, but
Pretty
as
big
of,
problem.
yeah, as of right now,
Around
those
here.
are contracted rates for those customers. So we have
Not
to,
all of it, but most of it.
Yeah.
Might be something we should look into.
Well, what I'd like to see along that line is we're comparing ourselves to other cities. It'd be nice to see what other cities did for effluent rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've looked at some of the effluent rate comparisons. They're very difficult to get because most cities don't have a distribution system in place for effluent water. And then the ones that do, it'll just be like for one customer only, and then it's a contracted rate with that customer, so they don't have to publish the contracted rate.
So it's apples to oranges.
Yeah, so it's difficult to get reuse comparisons.
But let's go ahead and see what we can find.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd like to
okay,
see that.
sure, yep. I will get back to y'all with the reuse comparisons. Let's see, one thing on the rates that, that we could potentially look at too is, right now we're looking at a 4% increase across the board. We could look at, different tiered kind of increases. I think y'all probably know we have a tiered rate structure, so the first 6,000 gallons of water are at one rate, and then 6 to 15 are at one rate, 15 to 25 at one rate. So, we're trying to encourage conservation through the use of that rate structure. So, we could potentially look at increasing rates more on the higher volume users, if that's something that y'all are interested in. It doesn't seem to have a large impact, 81 cents a month is what we're looking at for a pretty small user. One thing that I don't feel like I have good information on is the elasticity of demand on the water rates, as far as if we do increase it on those higher tiers, how much is that gonna make those customers cut back? But just some preliminary calculations, we're looking at like if we just did rate increases on those higher tiers, it'd be like a 7.5% increase on tiers over that initial first 6,000 gallon tier to get the same equivalent of revenue. So as of right now, though, we have it in at 4%.
So those users, would they be agricultural or?
No,
these
they'd
are-
be residential irrigation users.
Okay.
Similar to what we were doing for people that now get effluent, they would have been disincentivized to use as much, but because we took the rates so low, we actually incentivized the overuse. So it's actually contradictory to what we're doing on water when we did the effluent rates.
But we could consider a tier.
We could,
So
but, yeah, but
that
we'd end
might-
up dealing with contracts, that's the issue.
Well,
Mhm.
Yeah, but yes,
the
yes.
contracts are what, about 2 years left on some or more?
No,
Like 10 or 20.
Okay, so there's 10.
yeah,
Oh,
everybody
okay.
re-upped.
Yeah, and let's see, also just one other thing to mention on the water and sewer rates before we move on is we are contemplating additional rate increases in 2020 and 2021, and those are listed at the bottom there. So 6% on water in 2020, and then 2% on sewer in the next 2 years. As It's what we currently have contemplated. Once again, like, this purpose here is for fiscal year 19, so you won't be officially setting rates, anything beyond fiscal year 19, but just looking ahead. Anything else to add on that, Mark?
No.
Okay.
I will say, we better have a pretty good PR effort on this, because K-Pub is going up the rates as well. And so I think that'll play into this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So do we know by population, how many people fall in the 2,000 gallon category and how many fall into the 5,800 category? And would we have any
Yeah,
other?
I don't know offhand. I can look and see what kind of data I can find on number of households at the lower level.
We have that data.
So we could remind them it's 81 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what K-Pub's rates are gonna be, but I don't think that's, for the fact we haven't raised rates in a long period of time,
Right.
too.
Yeah, which is very unusual compared to our peer cities. Most of those cities are raising their rates every 1 to 2 years, so. All right.
Reuse?
All right, yes, moving on to reuse. Okay, so there's some detail on page 18 and 19 of your book. What we're contemplating right now is these reuse customers. As we mentioned previously, most of these customers have individual contracts with us. And the rate is governed by the contract. So we're looking at like 295 million gallons worth of usage on the reuse side. We're going through and doing a little bit more analysis before we get to the proposed budget, and we may take these down a little bit or adjust a little bit, but it won't be a significant impact either way. But Comanche Trace, Scott Schreiner Golf Course, KISD, Animal Shelter, and the truck haulers, we have pretty good historical average information for them. So we feel pretty good about those numbers. Kerrville Sports Complex has preliminary historical data, but the usage, there wasn't play on the field, and there's definitely still some variables there. Y'all also recently approved some money for some additional landscaping at the Kerrville Sports Complex, and so that's going to be some additional acres of irrigation that they didn't have this first year. So there's a few things like that. So we'll see how that one works out. Schreiner University, that one will be completely new. The potable water that they've been using, it's all mixed together as far as the consumption data, so we can see like the consumption of what they use for irrigation and inside their buildings, but it's not broken out by meters of this meter is now a reuse meter. It's like part of it was reuse and part of it was irrigation and part of it was inside. So the 40 million was an initial estimate.
Didn't they have weren't they paying different rates for what they were using them? Like, weren't they paying an irrigation rate for irrigation?
They did have some irrigation meters, and you're right, if they have a designated irrigation meter, then you don't pay sewer on that, and it's at a different rate. But not all of their irrigation was like that. Some of their older meters had things potable or just regular rates, and some of it was going inside and some of it was going outside. And they've done a lot of just completely replumbing the whole system to separate out as much, use as much reuse as possible, because obviously that's a cost advantage for them.
Do we know how solid the Comanche Trace numbers are? Because when they did their contract, they were taking an option on like 250 million gallons a year. Is there a reason?
They have not used that, so this is based on.
No, I always wondered, because I think their max before was like 140 or something, and.
Yeah, looking at their historical average, they're right around this 93 million, and so that's what that's the basis there, and depends on the weather and how much
These all
they
the
need
customers
that.
that we're expecting to have, or are we expecting any new customers anytime soon?
This is it for now.
This is it.
All Yeah, and the truck haulers, you can actually pull up and like get a load of reused water, so that's what that piece of it is. So it doesn't go through a distribution system or anything, it just goes into a tank.
Right, but they pay more since they're distributing it themselves.
It's,
Right.
yeah. There's, it depends on their tank size,
Yeah.
but they just pay a flat rate depending on if their
Yeah.
tank size is under 3,000 gallons or 3 to 8,000 gallons. All right, anything else on reuse? Okay. Moving on to other fees in the water and sewer fund. These are not, significant revenue generators, but we went back and looked at our fees on actually buying meters and putting in taps, and especially on the hardware itself, we've had increases in our costs from our supplier. And that's something that we would definitely want to cover our costs on. We're not looking at, making a huge profit or anything on this, but we do want to cover our costs. So we've gone in and adjusted fees, and they're on this chart here, and then also in the very back of your book, you can see the changes. But looking at our fees compared to Fredericksburg and Bernie, just as two examples, we're lower than those cities. So anyway, but we are looking at some slight increases, and some of these, like the tap fees, include estimated labor, and so we make sure we cover our costs based on an estimated amount of labor.
And these fees are, tap fees,
Mhm.
are essentially to try and recoup infrastructure building, right? That we, over time, we kind of collect back, right?
Not the way that we
It's-
charge.
yeah,
Some cities
some
do
cities.
that. That's why you see such a disparity.
Right.
Us
Bernie,
versus
yeah.
Bernie, for example. They try to recover some of their costs through the tap fee. And arguably, that's not appropriate.
So then what are we doing? How are we coming up with the number that we come up
The
with?
cost to do the
Yeah,
tap.
so we're looking at,
Just the
actually.
cost of that actual service.
Yes.
We look at the actual parts, how much do those
Okay.
cost, and then we look at what, how long on average does it take, how many people, and calculate out a labor rate. And it's just those two added together, and then we, round it off to a round number here, but.
The actual numbers are
um,
on page 20 in your book, if you wanted to see
Okay,
those.
and the water rates themselves we're doing to cover our operations, right? So when we compare to other cities, it's, unless we know what their operation costs are, it's kind of like an arbitrary comparison anyways, right?
Not on the
Yeah.
operating system.
Everybody operates with the same, they got the same costs on their,
No, I mean, everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
So to some degree,
Yeah.
based upon geography, based upon what's your source of water,
yeah.
and how you get it to the plant, how many plants you have, and so forth. So you're never going to get an apples to apples comparison
Right.
completely.
But certainly, I would think a lot of your constituents would be concerned if Kerrville's rates were significantly higher, or significantly different than, our surrounding cities, so. But you're right, every water system is different, so. All right, let's see. Okay, moving on to water and sewer expenditures, which detail of that can be found on pages 23 to 33 of your book. So like we mentioned before, our debt transfer includes the first year payment on the Legion Lift Station debt, and this would be that new debt from the Texas Water Development Board. We're also looking at taking out a loan on the TTHM mitigation project. The way that it's looking right now as far as when that loan would actually happen, when the first draw would be, that kind of thing, it does not look like we'll have any debt service due on that loan in 2019. It'll be 2020 before that starts. That's why we just have the Legion Lift portion there. As far as employees, we added one position, a chief operator position, to the water distribution department. And one thing that we've been doing this way for several years, but we do have a fairly large contingency, $250,000 in contingency, specifically for large repairs when we get into you know, pumps and wells and things like that fail, we can definitely be looking at a $50,000 repair, you know, at one time. So our operating departments have been pretty conservative in what they're looking at as far as just regular maintenance and operations. And then if they do have a large repair that, you know, they weren't able to predict, then they would be drawing money from this contingency budget to pay for that. The transfer to general fund, so that's another chunk in the water and sewer transfer budget. Includes the 3% street use fee that we talked about when we did the general fund budget presentation. But we have gone back and analyzed that support services fee some more, and we've taken it down by about $95,000 from what we showed you in the June workshop. And specifically, we just went back and looked at allocation methodology, and because we were allocating like the entire finance department at a certain percentage, and we had moved some things around, we figured out that we were allocating a portion of some fees that cover property tax collection and CAD, that kind of stuff, to the water and sewer fund, and we didn't think that was appropriate since they're not property tax supported. So we backed all of that out and redid their calculations, so we've brought that down some. And there's some detail in your book on the, you know, specific by department. All right, moving on to water and sewer capital projects. So this is a little tricky on how to do this, but your book, you'll notice, has this big fold-out piece of paper. So if you go to the first fold-out piece of paper in your book, it's on page 36. Yeah, there it is. So this has a bunch of numbers. When we start looking at capital projects, we call it our community investment plan, and we go out 10 years looking at what are our needs over the next 10 years. Obviously, that's subject to change every year as we as we get more information, but we do want to be as forward-looking as we can, especially on these large expenditures. So some things to note for fiscal year 2019. Our largest projects will be the Legion Lift Station expansion and the TTHM mitigation project that we've been talking about with y'all for a while. The Legion Lift Station project will be funded with a $2 million contribution from EIC and then debt funding from the Texas Water Development Board for the remainder. The TTHM mitigation project will be funded with the Texas Water Development Board loan. And then we also have expenditures in 2019 for some other projects, including rehabilitating the water reclamation oxidation ditch, rehabilitating water production's clarifier. We have some money in for a potential new well, and then some master plan update on the wastewater side, some additional system looping, and the long-range water plan that y'all have heard about some before. One thing to note that I know Stuart definitely wants y'all to make sure you know is, as we do these master plan updates, those master plan updates could dictate that we need to change things going forward if there's a more critical need or something we don't have or something that needs to be rearranged. Anything else on the projects, Mark or Stuart?
No.
Kyle?
I got a question about the ASR. Is that something we're going to work on, or is that something we're doing on our own? We have an idea where that's going to be.
It's kind of a combination of both. Right now we are working with Headwaters. Yeah, you or Stuart, either one, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I hope we do that soon.
Mm-hmm. We're working with Headwaters and their geology group. They're continuing to explore various aquifers within Kirk County. They kind of struck out on the last well site on the south end of Kirk County, but they're looking at additional sites across the county that we're exploring with them.
Okay. So does ASR be in the city limits, or does it have to be in the city limits, or can
it may or may not be an ASR. It's very, we labeled it, very tenuously right now. It could be a water production well, depending on what their results are.
Okay.
It could be an ASR well, depending on what those water production elements are. So it's just giving us the potential to explore an opportunity with them in the future.
Okay. So that 350 is kind of looking.
It's on the high end.
It's not actually drilling an ASR.
It could be.
Could be, okay.
It could be.
I guess my question.
Yes, sir. It would be enhancing a well. They would be looking primarily at water monitoring. A full-blown production well would be more in the range of about 350,000. So that's what we budgeted for this time. We'd have to see after they do some initial digging on how productive that well actually is.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask what's happening in 2023 for the 10 million, or should I know what that is?
Yes.
Yes.
Basically a new CO.
Okay.
And then down below, you can see several projects listed. So this is really when we have new capacity to be able to do more
We're
projects.
just predicting that.
That's why it's pushed that far out.
Okay.
And so, whether it's the NAP wet well, or the interceptors, some big ticket items there.
Okay.
And
Any
so
of
forth.
these that are listed,
Right.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Right, but it is looking out at when would we have capacity for additional debt in order to fund these projects, and so that's what's pushed it out to the 2023.
And of course, we look at this every year, so it could be
Mhm.
that next year, our debt is looking differently based upon our loans and so forth, and we move it up a year, so.
Okay.
And these projects may shift as well. As stated before, we plan on doing the water and wastewater master planning efforts, and so there may be prioritization shifts or new projects that come out of that.
Okay,
Mhm.
well, that explains it. Yeah, so, thank you.
All right, moving on to water and sewer asset replacement. So we have separate funds set up on both the water sewer side and the general fund side specifically for asset replacement. You can kind of think of it like a savings account where you're saving for a new car kind of thing. So on the water and sewer asset replacement side of things, if you look at page 38 in your book, there's some detail there. And then on the slide here, we are planning several purchases, and they're listed here: a vacuum excavation trailer, generators at the well sites, 2 mowers at water reclamation.
I have a question about those.
Yes, sir.
Who's gonna do the mowing?
I'll let Stuart address that one.
Water reclamation right now is going to be doing the mowing at the well site, or excuse me, at the reuse pond.
Okay, so water reclamation staff will be doing that mowing.
As much as they can, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Let's see, a generator for the lab, and then a dump truck and a 1-ton truck. That both of these expenditures are replacing some pretty old stock that we have.
What do we do with the old vehicles?
We do a combination of things. So if if they're still usable and another department can use a vehicle that's of that age and that kind of thing, we could potentially transfer to another department. If
The council auto fleet? The
What?
council auto fleet?
Yeah.
No? Oh, just
you want a
thought.
dump truck?
Yeah.
Usually what we do is we sell it at auction.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we do get
Yes.
something back? for
Yes.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
do we show that anywhere?
Yes, it's shown as a revenue in the asset replacement funds, and it's disposal of
Okay.
assets is the line item. And we're required by state law to make sure that we get a fair market price for our assets. So I can't just say, how about you buy it for $500? We have to prove that we are getting a fair market price on it. And the easiest way that we've found to do that is using a website called GovDeals, which is kind of like an eBay type website. So it's an online auction site that meets all the state requirements for showing that you're getting fair market value for selling an item. So definitely with vehicles, we put them on GovDeals and sell them that way.
Do we have
But
a-
anyone can bid on them. Y'all are welcome to bid on them. So.
These and other
Can't
vehicles that
wait.
we're gonna see later, are these all on some sort of a redo plan, or are they just
Mhm.
kinda as needed?
Yeah, we do look at, we do have a multi-year plan for what we anticipate going forward when we anticipate things will need to be replaced. Of course, that's subject to change based on, if a vehicle is in an accident, or if there's some significant repairs that happen sooner than what we thought, that kind of thing. But,
Let me comment on
yes.
that.
Mhm.
So, Garamo has implemented software where we're now rating vehicles and constantly rating them based upon their maintenance and their age and so forth. So you want to comment on that, Cameron?
So, the software that we implemented is called iWork, and it's a software that allows us to capture all the maintenance costs that we're actually putting into the vehicles. It captures their fuel costs, it captures their age, and it uses a formula to create a replacement rating. And then based on that replacement rating, we're able to evaluate the vehicle even further to say, okay, yes, can we move it to another department, or do we need to just go ahead and sell it off? So that whole software, we just implemented it in April, and so we're just now collecting information, but it's becoming a very useful database for us, and will be in the future. So.
And we previously had been using a point system as well, but it was very difficult to get the maintenance piece of it for sure. And it was a very manual process to kind of come up with a point tally, and the software certainly will facilitate us getting more detailed records for each vehicle and having a automatically calculated score.
So to go with that, are we essentially setting aside money annually that builds up to the
Correct.
replacements?
Yes.
So for example, at the year end, we'll do the budget transfer from surplus from last year.
Yeah.
That basically, most of that will end up being going to the asset replacement fund. And so we anticipate over several years what the cash flow needs to be, and then what our needs are through this modeling.
Okay, with that way doing it, it's sort of an accidental budgeting. If we don't actually have a line item saying, if we do X number of dollars each year, we'll kind of build up to it. We don't do that.
We do have that. We have a transfer to asset replacement in both the water, sewer, and general fund budget.
It's both.
But we can, we may change the amount of just the regular transfer to asset replacement depending on if there is a budget amendment with extra funds allocated. But yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, I've got a question. When I look at all of these projects, I think about the comprehensive plan and the action steps there. Are we stopping doing anything? I mean, are we not doing something this year we did previously in order to do something else?
On the capital projects?
Yeah.
No. When we built the Kerrville 2050 plan, we knew these things were already on the horizon, and so they were put in the plan knowing that they were already something that we were contemplating. So there was a conscious effort to make sure that the two were aligned. And they're not completely aligned, and as time goes on, they'll get less aligned, especially as you heard the update of the master plans, which we'll do one next year and then another master plan shortly thereafter. And then we'll rework what priorities are based upon the council, recommendations and decisions, and looking at the engineer's information. So, a lot of that will also be driven by where we start to see growth and where we've opened up for growth. So for example, if, I'm just making this up, but if Legion Lift Station goes in, and then all of a sudden we see a lot of need for more distribution line or sewer collection lines, then we may see a project on there that's a new sewer trunk line, or force main. Don't know that's the case, but that's how that would work.
All right, one other question. You mentioned an additional staff person in water. Again, with looking at these projects and comprehensive plan, is there plan for additional, or is there need for additional personnel?
There's more than we've asked for. The staff has asked for additional personnel beyond what you're seeing here in this early draft of the budget. They actually asked for more. So this is what we've limited it to for this year. It's more for the operating side and what we need in terms of operate our crews.
Okay. I just think that's something we really got to stay on top of in terms of load on personnel and how do we anticipate, okay, we really need, additional people here or there. And I know there's a sense in which we don't want to add more personnel, but if that's what it takes to get it done, we gotta get it done.
Yeah, so in terms of strategy, several layers here, right? So you got the comprehensive plan, and then you've got, the staff is now building a strategic plan to execute on the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the department level business plans that support that. And then the next layer is the budget on an annual basis. So it all ties together.
Mhm.
And so now we're building that strategic plan, and that's getting to what you're talking about, is if we're gonna execute on this within this period of time, what kind of staff is it gonna take, what kind of resources and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and our water and sewer department does do an excellent job of getting a lot done with a staff that's really stayed constant. They haven't had much change in their total number of staff.
Well, they've actually had a reduction when you look at the administrative support.
All right. Moving on to water and sewer debt service. Page 39 to 43 in your book. These are some updated numbers here. They're a little different than what was shown when we initially did got your approval to do the loan applications. These numbers are super conservative. They're coming from First Southwest, and they just really want to make sure they completely cover all the bases on how much interest rates could go up and additional needs. So, but as far as looking at our remaining capacity, and we have a constraining, a self-imposed constraint that we don't want to spend more than 35% of our water and sewer revenue on debt service. And so over on the far right-hand side, you'll see a column, the next to the last one, that says 35% of revenue limit. So we're going through and projecting out our revenue over the coming years, and then multiplying that times 35% and comparing it to our debt service to make sure that we have some room in there.
You say we don't want, which is true, but it's a charter limit, isn't it? Or is that just a policy limit?
It's a policy,
Okay.
yeah. On the water and sewer side, it's a city council policy limit to be set at 35%. So anyway, it looks like using these, the rate increases that we have budgeted and looking at a conservative estimate on our debt, that we will have capacity. Looking out to 2023 and 2027, those are the years where we looked at issuing potentially more debt. We're making assumptions on what kind of interest rates we can get at that time, and obviously a lot of revenue assumptions as well, but we do want to look forward as much as we can. So
Do you have any
this
debt that's falling off anytime soon, or is it all?
Yeah. On page 41 of your book, a nice color chart that shows how the debt's layered in by issue. So you'll see in 2023, you'll have the pink fall off, which is your CO 2008.
What's the logic behind carrying a big fund balance in a debt service fund?
We have to have money in there for the next debt payment. So the way that we do our debt payments twice a year, and the way that the accounting rules work are we have to have money accrued at the end of the year for the portion of the year that we've already incurred debt service on, but we haven't had to pay it yet.
Okay.
But we have to have that money reserved. We can't just move it over at the last minute kind of
It's
thing.
part of our bond covenants too.
All right. Moving on to the general capital projects side of things. This
Before
is
you get too far, I'm
Yes,
sorry, I
sir.
forgot to ask a question.
Mhm.
Can you get me the numbers of the 4% and 6%, how much that actually is? You don't have to do it today, but that's numbers I'd like to look at.
Yes,
The
on the,
increase.
and you're looking at like how much a 1% increase,
That's
what
fine.
difference
Yeah.
that is per 1%? Is that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
that'll
that's the note that I wrote down, so
Okay.
yeah, I will get that to you. And I'll send that out to everyone. Okay, on the general capital project side, it's your next big fold-out piece of paper, on page 46 of your book. All right, and on the general side, in 19, a couple of things that we know are happening are the tennis center renovations that y'all are aware of, and that we have that funded through a contribution from EIC. And then we're also looking at the downtown and garage streetscape improvements that are also being funded by EIC. Right now, in the projections we have, and some money for the AC Shriner Mansion, which is the 529 Water Street property renovations, but we have not identified the funding source for that yet, so there will be more discussions to come. Some of the other little bit smaller items that are definitely in right now are we're going to be continuing on with our landfill expansion permitting. That's been a multi-year process, and we'll continue to have more expenses related to that. And then some of these things we talked about on the during the general fund budget discussions, but some money for development services software, money for the public safety complex study, development services code rewrite. We're looking at enclosing the clock tower elevator so that hopefully we won't have that elevator down so often. And then looking at a drainage master plan and pavement master plan update. So those are the things specifically identified for next year. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the debt service slide. But looking forward, there's obviously big projects on here like the public safety complex and significant improvements with aquatics and parks and that kind of thing. And in order to fund those, we'd be looking at issuing debt to fund those, and we're looking at a bond election that would happen in May of 2019. And we'll get to this a little bit more on the debt service side, but looking at issuing debt in tranches so that we can keep our debt service tax rate the same and still be able to issue debt along the way and get these projects done. Any comments on that,
Yeah,
Mark?
so what she means by tranches is just phases. So you do, let's just say we did the public safety building first. We'd get authorization through a bond election to do all of it, but you wouldn't do it, you wouldn't sell all the debt at one time. You do maybe the public safety building first and then follow on with another phase or tranche to do streets and drainage, and then another phase and tranche to do some parks. So one of the things that we have to, I think we may have talked about this at your retreat, and it's on your future agenda listing, is to appoint a committee to start looking at some of the these needs and decide what's going to be in a bond election or not and when. And I think we're all familiar with the fact that KISD is wanting to do a bond election, and so we're trying to make sure the timing is right, around that as well. But
When are they doing theirs?
right now they're planning on November. And then the other thing to think about is you also have the potential for a charter election in May as well.
Mm-hmm.
So bond election, charter election, council election, all at the same time.
A lot of action.
Mhm.
Raise the rates, collect the debt.
Yeah.
We're gonna be all about PR.
Well-
The park improvements is just the aquatics? Is that what this is talking about?
If you look at the bottom of page 46, there's also some other park improvements listed.
Okay.
So you said raise the rates, which rates?
Just talking about the water rates, and then we're doing the debt. I mean, the bond election is the school. I'm just saying.
Oh, I see.
All at once, people are gonna, little or big, they're just.
Raising it every year,
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So, well, the reason I was asking is that the idea on the geo side is that there would not be a tax increase. So we would layer in new debt as old debt's being paid off, so there would not be a tax increase for these new issues.
Yeah, and we'll get to that slide in just a few minutes, but that, is our constraining factor on the general fund debt side, as we're looking at how much could we issue with leaving the tax rate the same, not raising it.
And not to go into it too far, but fiber infrastructure, what is it we're talking about there? It says to be determined.
I wanted
but-
the same thing.
This is
Or is that citywide?
This is our project related to KPUB's effort. If we're a partner in that, we don't know what the cost is. So they're going to go to automated meter reading on a
Right.
fixed base network.
Right.
Our meter reading capabilities are aging, and we're at the point we're going to need to replace some of that. And so we need to make a decision if we're gonna partner with K-Pub to go to fixed base network versus the mobile drive-by that we have now. And that's what that is.
And it gets us infrastructure for the possibility of like citywide Wi-Fi, right?
It,
I mean, we can't do that without something like that, right?
right, that's possible, but it also could be to synchronize signals, to,
Yeah.
you know, all sorts of things. But yes, it could be used for other
Yeah.
purposes.
Yeah, or like in the parks, you know.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to cooperate with K-Pub in regard to Wi-Fi?
Not, well, it could be as part of this project,
Mm.
the one that Mr. Brewer just mentioned.
We're good with George. That's okay. That's it.
City Hall amount, what is that?
The what?
The City Hall, the 3,175,000.
I just have that on there because we're required in our budget book to show like what happened in 2017 and then roll it forward, and we had a little bit of activity, related to spending some final money on, City Hall, so.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so there's nothing
So it's
new
really
on
the
that
difference,
going
it's not
forward,
new.
it just helps us roll our fund balance to where we need to start the year with.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Okay, moving on to general asset replacement on page 45 and 46. I'm sorry, 47 and 48. So this is the same kind of fund that we talked about on the water and sewer side. It's kind of like a savings account, and we do a lot of vehicle replacements through there. So we'll talk about that first on the general fund side, because we have a lot of vehicles to replace every year, but especially in 2019. We're starting here with a pumper truck for $650,000, so that's a very large expenditure. And you may remember that we also had that in the 2018 budget. So we have two trucks that we bought just about at the same time, and both need to be replaced at the same time. One thing that I don't want y'all to be confused about, but so we have a pumper truck in the 2018 budget. Y'all approved it, and y'all approved, council approved actually purchasing it from this corporation, Sutphen. Ends up that it's like a 12 to 14 month process, lead time from the time you order it to the time you get it. So we're actually gonna get that first one in 2019 and pay for it then. And then the second one, we won't actually get till 2020 and pay for it then, just because of the lead time that it takes. So we're only talking about two trucks, but there was money in the 2018 budget that actually won't be spent till 2019, and then we'll put in the 2019 budget money for that second truck.
So is that
But
gonna
it's
end up
two
being a
total.
budget amendment that we end up doing, or we don't have to?
Well, we don't have to, because we're not spending anything in
Right.
2018, so we don't have to do an amendment for that. In 2019, we'll buy one truck. So one truck will be delivered in 2019, and then the second truck will be delivered in 2020, and we'll pay for it then, so we'll have it in the 2020 budget.
It's just
that
programming
make
the next
sense?
budget,
So,
as
but,
opposed to admitting the current road.
but if we do it like what you just said, it won't show, it won't appear as a surplus in our budget this year, in 18?
It'll be that we didn't use all of our expenditure budget in 2018, and the fund balance, will reflect that.
Yeah.
So there won't be a reduction in that fund balance, and that fund balance will be available in the next year.
So on page 48, you'll see the fund balance is growing to 2.3 million at the end of the year, and then next year it draws down to 950,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that even though it'll actually show up in 3 budgets, we're not spending anything in 18 just because of the lag time on ordering the truck. So we're only buying 2 trucks, and since these are such big amounts, just wanted to make sure that was clear. And then we're looking at on the EMS side, 2 ambulance box remounts at $150,000 each. So we have an ambulance that has a 7-year chassis life, but the box on the back actually can last for 14 years. So Fire has developed a plan to make full use of that 14-year life, and we can just get a new chassis and put the old box on the new chassis, and that's cheaper than buying a new ambulance every 7 years. So we have these remounts going on in 2019. Then we have some vehicles for fire, patrol vehicles, which the patrol vehicles, those are definitely items that come up every year. You know, obviously PD puts a lot of miles on their vehicles, and
What is an average
Yeah.
life of a patrol vehicle?
about 4 years
Really?
is, and with the patrol vehicles, and Chief Knight can speak to this as well, those are vehicles that a lot of times can be repurposed for something else. So they might be able to go to an investigator or to someone that doesn't, you know, drive as much. But as far as the actual guys in the patrol and women in the patrol unit, they would have the newer vehicle. Chief Knight, anything you want to add on that?
The average lifespan of those cars is about 100,000 miles, for an average of 20,000 miles a year on a 4-year period of time. And then it takes time, once we order the vehicles, to get them in. But generally, those cars are sitting at 100 to 105,000 miles when they come off now.
And we are looking at replacing patrol vehicles with the Explorer that you'll see the picture of down there.
Are they gonna be SUVs or?
The Explorer seems to be what's working the best.
Yes, we're going to the Ford Explorer SUV. We're moving away from the Caprices. The Caprices have a lot of problems. So that's what we're going to carry a lot more fuel in those Explorers.
You said carry a lot more in terms of tools and equipment and so forth. Any other particular advantages?
Well, it gives you a little bit more height off the ground. Now, that can be a double-edged sword, but we haven't had any issues with a movement in center of gravity for those vehicles. So, of course, those vehicles used to be prone to rollovers when you started talking about raising the center of gravity. But SUVs now and those police package units are the suspensions work well with them. So there are certainly advantages to that.
Okay.
And we did have quite a few issues with the Caprices going through fairly, shallow amounts of water. But the way that they're designed, the water would get into the engine and cause significant
Yes, we
issues
lost
for the
two
vehicle.
to that particular problem in flooding, and it wasn't driving through high water areas. It was driving through very low water. The air intake is on the bottom side of that car, so it sucks water right up into the.
Do you buy locally?
That's what I was gonna ask.
We
If
buy
you
through
can,
buy
or-
board. In the
Okay,
buy board
the
system,
buy board.
we've been getting our cars from different upfitters.
Okay.
One of the issues that we have is when we buy these Explorers or any of these patrol cars, they're upfitted with, they come with lights, but everything else needs to be upfitted in the
Right.
car. The cage units, the overhead lights, everything else needs to be upfitted. So the only thing that we install once it gets here and locally is the radio system and
that's good.
the video
So it
system
comes
that we
pretty
use
ready
in the
then.
other cars.
And as far as that goes, it is a little easier for us to buy locally on things like parks maintenance trucks, street trucks, that kind of thing. We do have to, follow our purchasing policy and either get bids or use a co-op like Buy Board. But we have purchased several vehicles from Ken Stopel in the past few years, but not on the PD side since it's such a specialized.
They don't have the
Ford
ability to
Explorer,
upfit.
but it's not quite equipped to what yours are gonna be, but I do have the EcoBoost and it is great. When I'm getting on the highway, only.
Great.
Is the carbon monoxide business
Oh,
with the
yeah,
Ford
that was
Explorers all?
resolved.
Those issues with the carbon monoxide issue, they believe that those were actually based on upfitters
Some retro-
penetrating the passenger compartment and then not properly sealing them. But they were really specific to year models in the 2014, 2012, 2013, 2014 era. Ours are all 2015 and beyond. Now they have that warning out for 2015 year model Explorers as well, but we've installed carbon monoxide sensors in those units as a precautionary measure, and we've had no issues.
All right, moving on to page 15 on the slide presentation. In addition to vehicles and the asset replacement fund, we purchase equipment too. So you'll see our list of equipment here. One thing that's new here is the Lucas automated chest compression device that the EMS group is requesting. Chief, anything you want to say on that? And Chief Smith?
Yes, basically the Lucas device is a device we use on the EMS side. We cover all 1,100 miles of Kirk County. So if we get out in the county and our paramedics have to do CPR, then it's really a safety issue because they can't wear their seat belts there in the back trying to do chest compression. So the Lucas device replaces the paramedic actually having to stand in a moving vehicle under strain trying to perform chest compressions.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, I thought that one was interesting too, yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing a demonstration. No, I don't want to see a demonstration. I would never want that to be needed, but I guess the body fits in there and this.
Yeah, we typically strap the patient in on the on a backboard to the stretcher where they can't move, and then
And
the
so
Lucas
this does the work.
device inserts on the stretcher.
Right. Okay, moving on to general debt service.
I'm
This-
sorry, Amy, I was
Yes, sir.
gonna ask,
Uh-huh.
none of these are replacing things, these are just additional items we need?
At the sports complex, those are new. At Kerrville Shriner Park, those are replacement items. And then the servers and wireless controllers, I believe those are replacement servers. Is that right, Charlie, or is this additional server? Sorry, I don't know that one offhand.
That's okay. I was just
Or
curious
at
about
least
the
an
lower.
expanded server.
Oh, that's our replacement.
Okay, okay, so replacements on that. Oops. All right, general debt service, so we've already covered a lot of this, but, you know, what we were looking at in the general capital projects is how do we pay for these projects, and this is our proposal here. You know, we are making assumptions on interest rates, that kind of thing, and then our constraint is over on the far right side, the INS tax rate, and that stands for the interest and sinking tax rate, so it's the portion of your property tax bill that goes directly to debt service. So we're looking at, okay, we'd like to keep that rate the same, not change it. When could we issue debt and how much debt could we issue? And as Mark described, this would be based on actually doing an election in May, and one election that would cover multiple issuances. Okay, moving on to the golf fund. This is something that we've been talking to y'all about a little bit before, so you may recognize some of the same kind of information. But so golf has a negative cash balance right now. They're in a negative position. And we are proposing moving $200,000 over to the golf fund to kind of reset them and give them a new start. We're thinking right now it looks like they're going to have a negative cash balance of about $180,000 at the end of the year. So moving 200 over would give them a little bit of positive cash there. And then they are also looking at doing some improvements in 19. Well, in 19, they continue to get an $80,000 transfer from some from the general fund and some from the hot fund. They are renegotiating their lease. They're going to have some new equipment that they think will be good for maintaining the greens. We're looking at overseeding greens. We're looking at doing some net replacements, some things like that out at the golf fund. We are also looking at some small fee increases, like $1 to $2, and those are listed back in the fee schedule in the very back of your packet.
Why did we
looking
raise
at
it last year?
changes
We
there.
raised it $1 last year?
We did for non-seniors.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
This year
the
be
ones that
everybody?
we're,
This is everybody.
yeah, we're looking at the, like the regular, and the twilight, that kind of thing, so, yeah.
Okay.
And if they hit their budget, then they're gonna end up with the $20,000 cash, or is that being spent? You know, we're gonna transfer over 200,000 and it leaves them an extra 20 maybe.
Right,
So
so
is
if
that
they
gonna stay there?
exactly, if they
Yeah.
exactly spent their budget, then they would have 20,000 at the end of 19.
What's the primary reasons for the downturn at the golf course?
Well, I'll let EA or Scott talk to it. But
Overall, the industry's been, on a decline over the last 10 years. Industry-wide, it's 10 to 11%. Golf is just down. That's everything from just changes in demographics to, changes in the way that the game's played, it's kind of the top golf syndrome. Folks they're not going out to go play for 5 hours. They're going for a couple hours to top golf to go drink beer, and so it's just it's a change in the game that almost all courses are seeing. But we're looking at ways to continue to drive traffic and increase the playability for different demographics, getting more families out of the course, getting younger folks out of the course, and doing different strategies like that to make it more enticing to come play golf at our beautiful golf course.
Tybee and Shriner both use it too, don't they?
Absolutely, as well as our state championship Ingram women's golf as well. So.
But there have been complaints about the condition of the greens and the sand traps.
We've got.
Would that be addressed with these additional funds?
So we've got a difference in the greens certainly than the other two courses in town. They're not bent grass greens, but they are, and so it's a different level of playability during different seasons. Certainly during the winter months, your bent grass they're going to be great. But right now they're struggling. I can tell you the other two golf courses in town are having to really take a lot of care to try to keep those nice. You got Scott Shriner, and we've got some of the best greens in town right now. So summer's a great time to play for us, and it's a really struggle for some of the other courses. So it just depends on when you're at. But you're right, we absolutely will not have the finest condition of greens during the winter months. We are going to be doing some overseeding though this next year, which will make our winter play, I think, much better and much more enticing.
Which we haven't done in quite some time because of cost.
That'll bring the quality of the course up.
Yes,
and
we
the
think so.
looks of it and all, so.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to hotel occupancy tax and the hot reserve fund. All right. So we've talked about this some before. Occupancy tax is doing really well. We are right now estimating that we'll be up almost 5% over last year. It may be even better than that. Things are looking good on the occupancy tax side. And for next year on the regular hotel occupancy tax fund, so I guess let me clarify that first. We have two funds. We have our hotel occupancy tax fund, which is kind of our main operating fund. That's where all our new money comes into each month and where we pay the majority of our expenses. And then we also have a reserve fund that right now is just some money that initiated from hotel occupancy tax, but it is just sitting and earning interest revenue, but we're not paying operating expenditures out of it. So we're looking at, for fiscal year 2019, CBB funding of $942,000. So that would be our largest expenditure out of that fund. And that would give them a 3% increase over where we're funding them this year.
What did they ask for?
Like 965?
980.
7%. You walked out saying 7%.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know what it's going to cut out of whatever they
Yeah,
were
that's
hoping?
what I'd like to know.
Probably their advertising, because they've increased their advertising last year significantly, and now they're asking to do it again.
Yeah, advertising is their the biggest chunk of their budget, other than some administrative costs. But yes, this is a little bit less than the 980 that they ask for.
So how will that work? That we approve what we approve and then we report to them what we approve?
They have to live with whatever you all approve.
Okay.
And so if y'all have other thoughts on that, if you want to take it to the 7% based upon what you heard the other day at our joint meeting or what have you, then this would be a good time to let us know.
You know, I had asked in the meeting about advertisement and what rewards we thought, if there was any way they could guesstimate as to how much we benefit from advertising alone, because it's very difficult to gauge. We know we have a lot, but we don't know how many visitors. They try to ascertain how many came because of an advertisement that they picked up a magazine in Austin, literally. So it's a kind of a challenge to know, you know, should we just keep the average, is it working what we have now, or should we increase it? I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I do think they're doing a better job of with their metrics and the services that they're using to try to capture some of that. It's always going to be an inexact science, but I think they're doing a better job now with the new
Tracking it.
services that they've employed. And of course, the big telltale is the fact that it's just up. And now, is it attributed to them and their advertising? Well, that's the question, but it's up significantly. My reservation about large increases year after year for CVB is, I think we have some other opportunities with some of these funds to do other things. And whether that's, you know, the renovation of a facility, or if it's some new tourist venue, those kinds of things. So I don't want to set up the expectation that every year they're going to be getting these large increases for advertising. But it's not a huge increase that they're asking for compared to you know, what they have available, or we have available each year. Because it's not just the surplus that's there now at the end of the year. It's throwing off that additional income each year as well. So it's really.
What did we give them last year, or what did they get as far as?
915,000 is.
It's on page
yeah.
60 in your book.
Right.
It's 915,000. Year before that, it was 875. So they had a pretty significant increase last year.
Yeah, so it's about a 5% increase from 17 to 18.
Okay. And was the 3% based on anything in particular?
Salaries?
Pardon?
Salaries.
Salaries, okay, okay,
Or personnel costs like benefits.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
What, and this isn't CVB, but it's on the hot tag. Explain what other expenses really is, and what happened to, weren't there 5 things that were getting 25,000 and now there's only gonna be 3? And if that's right, what were the other 2 that we aren't doing?
Chalk Festival, we budgeted, but they never asked for it.
Okay.
And then sports complex.
Right, was never used
mhm.
because it was all being done out of CVB's
It was
existing
marketing?
budget. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Right, and then.
Did we just move those to Playhouse 2000?
Plus, you have a new events coordinator position.
I know I wanted to do this last year with Playhouse 2000, and people did not like the idea of that, so is this gonna be okay this year?
This is what we're recommending.
Mhm.
It's eligible.
like the
It's an
idea.
eligible
Mhm.
expense,
Mhm.
and
Who's presenting it? Because I need to talk to you, because I got more ideas that I'd like to
Well,
smooth out.
I'm in tandem with Jeffrey, of course, who'll be speaking tomorrow night, who's going to give you a report on where they stand, and they're working on a 5-year plan now.
So is this funding okay coming from hotel occupancy tax? Because I brought it up last year, and
I mean, I'm okay with it.
I think you might have.
We will need to collect
Right.
some additional data from them. Mike has looked into this. You know, we need to show that they have people attending their performances that are from outside of the city that
Right.
could potentially generate overnight stays in our city. But it sounds like they have the data to support that that is the case, and so these would be eligible expenses. But to Mr. Brady's question, what makes up that 180,000? So we do have 50,000 moved over for Playhouse 2000. We have 60,000 for the Arts Co-op, and then we also have a 70,000 contingency budget in hotel occupancy tax in case there was something that came up during the year.
The 50,000 for Playhouse,
Mhm.
what is it targeted for? Anything in particular?
it's not
Just
specific.
operations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where's the other 25 coming from?
Which other?
I think we're funding 75,000 a year. 50's coming from this. There's another.
Of the utilities
The
and the box
utilities,
office.
yeah.
The box office is in and out, right?
Yeah, the box office, we get a donation from the
Okay.
Callow Foundation to help pay for their box office assistance.
As you know, we had that 20-year contract, which is, it's, parts of it have already been amended, and in 2020 it expires. So Jeffrey and Mark and I and EA have all been working on, because most of it was all construction, and it didn't really address future maintenance and utilities and expense needs to go further into the future when that was done in 2000. So we're also working on the new contract. well, I'm not, but the powers to be are working on that, to put something in writing to make sure it's planned and allowed for, to keep it going.
So we've been giving them 50,000
Correct.
on a regular basis,
Yes.
just for general maintenance?
Yes.
Okay.
But not contractually, right?
That's correct.
And they're using all of it?
Yes.
You know, I'm on the board, I was before here, and working real closely with Jeffrey on the entertainers and how they like to be paid. And they're very expensive, the popular ones, and to draw a crowd, we have to pay them usually at least half up front. And then, they can run anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a performer. So between that and some HVAC issues that we've had, because the building's almost 20 years old, so the expenses are catching up with us, and the demand to bring in good performers is to fill seats. And if you don't have good performers and you start to have a trend where you don't fill seats, it's hard to get that momentum back up. So that's just a bigger picture, just to give you some ideas. It's a challenge. And some of our grants did not come through. Peterson gave us 50%, and Callow actually did not fund one of the grants they had been giving us before. So that's part of the shortfall at this particular time. So
This isn't a contractual thing either, right? We're just throwing it over there this year, right? 50,000?
Well, the idea is that we get a new contract.
Right.
yeah, and then maybe utilities would be more addressed, certain things that are ongoing every year. I mean every month. So would be in the contract maybe addressed a
Well,
little
we have
differently.
about, what is it, $11,000 in utilities that comes out of general fund.
Yeah.
That also we pay, so.
On top of the 50?
Right, and then there's an endowment fund for major
Right.
maintenance.
Right.
Okay.
Which we're starting to use, but we hadn't. Anyway, it's a long story regarding that, but Calhoun's have been very generous up until now. Now they've, I believe, had other interests, and their money's gone other places. And so what we had was a great start. Now I think we need to, just like the golf course and just like the sports complex, we have to look at it as an investment, an amenity that we want to maintain. That's my plug. So there you go.
All right, getting to the end here. So in your book, you'll see all kinds of different funds. We have a lot of funds, and a lot of them that are specifically restricted, like hotel occupancy tax, where they can only be used for certain things. So this is just a snapshot of some of the larger ones, and what we're looking at for next year. Things like the Employee Benefit Trust Fund, that's where our health insurance premiums are paid out of. Police Special Revenue, that's when they seize vehicles or cash, and then the suspect is prosecuted. A lot of times will receive that money as part of the adjudication process. But it has to be used specifically for police-related items. It can't just be put back into the general operating fund. So same kind of thing on all of these. These are things that, money that we get in, but it's restricted for certain uses. So, but down at the bottom, that Callow Theater Endowment Fund, that's what we were just referring to, where maintenance items can be paid out of that
There's
fund.
a cap on that too. I think it's $35,000 a year.
Yeah, it's 5%.
In our one bill can be that
Mhm.
to fix the HVAC.
Yeah, that fund, you can use the interest revenue and then up to
Mhm.
5% of the corpus on an annual basis. So.
What is PEG special revenue?
Let's
Public
see.
educational and
And
government.
governmental.
It's a fee on your cable bill
Mhm.
through the state franchise, and then the state sends us that money to be used for programming on Channel 2.
Mhm.
And
So it's from Spectrum, Time
Right.
Warner.
And it's for capital, not operating, so it's what
Mhm.
Charby uses to update a lot of this facility, and a lot of technology.
Yes.
Federal one? Is that a federal one? Or
It's state,
It-
it's a
yeah,
state
and it's-
franchise, but it's a federal law.
does it have a time limit on it? Like, is it gonna stop happening? Okay.
But it is based on like Spectrum's revenue. It doesn't apply to like Dish or, or
Right.
streaming services or anything like that. It's specific as to who has to pay it, but a lot of the city council, streaming video, that kind of stuff, equipment for that can be paid for out of that.
Yeah, the grant and stuff we paid out of that.
All right.
In past years, how well have we done in projecting income?
Overall, our stated goal is to be within 5% of budget on both the expenditure and the revenue side, and we're usually within 2 to 3%.
Good.
We generally have surpluses.
Do what?
We generally have surpluses.
As a result of not spending.
Yeah.
Just wanted to go over the next steps one more time, just to make sure everyone understands them. So looking into August, on the 14th, Mark will be presenting the official proposed budget. So what you have now is the unofficial draft, but he'll be presenting the official proposed budget. That'll be filed with the city secretary's office on July 31st. Also on the 14th, we'll have the resolution to set the proposed tax rate. And then we get into public hearings and first readings and second readings, and it ticks on down the line till a final approval on September 25th.
So on your agenda, you have an opportunity to comment on any other funds as well. So that would basically be general fund, is I think the only one that we didn't cover today. And
Before we do that,
Yes.
can I ask, because I kind of let some go by, and I was,
Sure.
if I could just pull up some. In page 9 of our book, it's like a summary or whatever, and it had something, a non-cash adjustment of like 4.7 million and 27. What was that?
So on the water, this gets into real accounting kind of stuff, but on the water and sewer side, it's called an enterprise fund that uses full accrual accounting. And so that's basically when we finish projects, when we finish capital projects, that money becomes unreserved. So while we're doing a capital project, we have money in the capital project fund reserved for that capital project. Once the project becomes complete or portions of it become complete, that gets transferred to just a capital asset, and capital assets are considered unreserved fund balance.
Okay.
Because we would have the right to sell them if we want to. And this is where it gets kind of tricky on the water and sewer side, that when you look at unreserved fund balance, it looks like, oh, we have this huge unreserved fund balance, but so much of it is actually capital assets, and we're not gonna, dig up pipe and sell it or whatever. And so that's why we think it's better to look at cash and receivables as a percent of expenditures rather than looking at unreserved fund balance, because we just have so many capital assets and those are considered unreserved.
Okay. So that's gonna like happen periodically?
Every time we do capital projects, and when,
Yeah.
as we complete capital projects, then that'll get moved over to just a regular capital asset, and it won't be, money held in the capital projects fund that's reserved for capital projects.
so you'll probably see it every year, but it'll be in the prior year.
Mhm.
Okay, and then, I guess it was I guess it's the bottom of page 9, there's some notes, and it says something about, assumptions being made. It says 5% maintenance is gonna increase and 1.3%
Mhm.
other expense. Is that just a sort of arbitrary number, or did we have justification to pick 5%, say?
We've looked at historical, for sure, and on the maintenance side, we know that we have, larger than usual increases in chemicals. And then we also know that, with the TTHM filtration system, there's likely to be more, maintenance related to that. We don't know how much it's going to be yet, but we wanted to put in something higher than usual, because of those things that we know we have coming up, so.
Okay, and, I'm not sure why I wrote it. I think maybe it's page 9, I don't know, but it says, were line items reshuffled between maintenance and other expenses? Like, accounting
Yeah.
wise? Because the numbers, I mean, the total
Yes.
seems right,
Mhm.
or same, but
Mhm.
that's all
Same
it was.
thing, yeah, same thing we
Yeah.
talked about last time is, we have the new chart of accounts with the conversion of our software. And so it gives us a lot more detail by, say, maintenance items that we didn't have prior year. And so we've collapsed a lot of those for illustration purposes, but there's been some minor shifting where you can't necessarily compare
Right.
exactly year to year.
And I think the main thing that you may be seeing, it relates to contingency. So we budget contingency as a certain line item, and that falls into the other expenses category. But then when something big actually happens and we need to use it, we do a line item transfer that, per our financial policies, as long as it doesn't increase overall expenses, the city manager can transfer money between line items. And so we'll move some of that contingency money to maintenance or to supplies or whatever the large unexpected expense may be. So as we go through the year, the contingency goes down and some of those other line items go up.
And this is just sort of I guess it'd be a goofy question. Reuse sales. Is there a reason to put that under reclamation as opposed to distribution? Is it just because it's not water, or because aren't the sales really bouncing off distribution of?
Well, it
effluent?
might if it ever becomes potable.
So
But really,
so
it's-
our water distribution is really potable water distribution. Okay.
Right, and running the reuse pond, maintaining it, all that kind of stuff is being done by the water reclamation department.
Okay. And this is just one, because everybody knows I paid real close attention to it when he built it, but somewhere in I think it's page 19 of the book, maybe, it gives us a list of something, 19 of the book.
The
Month to month.
customers,
Reuse
yeah.
sales.
Mhm.
Gallons used by different reuse customers.
Yeah, so, just because mostly it's Comanche coming in so low, if I'm reading that right, it looks like that pond we're using is really unnecessary almost. Because the production in the biggest month is gonna be August, and it looks like we're gonna produce as much as we're gonna use. All the rest of them are about 50%. So just as a,
Right, so this is based upon, as you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
a year where it's wet.
yeah,
Like last year, we had some rain, and they had the capacity, all of these do, to use more. And the pond was there for that for, 90 days was the
Yes, sir.
last?
yeah,
So, so this is very conservative.
yeah. But it's historically correct on Comanche. I mean, it's an average over history. I'm just saying, because they also each have reserves on their own facilities, right? They got 12, and they say they got 12 million or something. So,
They have a lot, they have 25 homes under construction right now and
yeah.
possibly up to 50 total within the next 12 to 18 months, so there's gonna be more demand for water at that point.
But not effluent, right? We're just
No,
watering golf
correct,
course, right?
right,
Yeah.
right.
Common areas.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyways, it was just kind of jumped out at me. Anyways, that's all I got. You can go on to the.
Okay. Regarding other funds, as you all know, we're in the middle of some discussions with the county about animal services and library services. Had a good meeting on Friday with the judge and Commissioner Mosier. And I sent y'all an email this morning about where we're headed. And really, it's all still up in the air in terms of where we're gonna land on this, but they have asked for 50,000 more. That's not in this budget. So that would be a budget item that would need to be accounted for if we were to do something like that. At this point, I'm not planning on having it included, but all that's subject to more discussion and obviously your final decision on any amendments, so.
Any idea where it would come from, if we didn't decide?
No.
Not yet.
Did you get, I haven't read your email, did you get the information you needed from the county?
No.
Okay.
That's part of the email.
Okay.
It was a good meeting, it was very productive. They said they would get some information and also appoint a couple of people to work with me on their side to get to where we needed to go. And so any other questions on any other funds that we haven't covered for you today or at the last meeting?
No, but if we do, we can always.
Sure, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I wrote
There's a
down
lot
the
of numbers
questions,
there.
a couple questions that I'll follow up with y'all on that I didn't have the answer to offhand. Okay.
Your gut feeling, Mark, on the animal thing, necessary?
You know, it's hard to say because I haven't seen the information. So logically, if they're reducing hours significantly by going on call to fulfill their contractual requirements, you know, to do patrol, then they would have personnel that they were previously was working in the evenings that could be reallocated to the daytime to perform some of these new services. And then they are talking about expanding some shelter hours on the weekends and some evenings, which is a good thing. So it's hard to say without looking at the data. I want to see a staffing plan and you know, what services are going to be provided exactly and how they're provided, and then what's the budget associated with that. So that's the information that I've been waiting for, and I'm sure it will get here. It's just a matter of time. Part of the issue that they have, and it's difficult for them, is that they've got animal services buried in a larger department and shared positions between animal services and other environmental types of costs. And so it's hard for them just to kind of say, here's the budget out of a page of a book. They've got to really examine the numbers. And so I'm sure the treasurer over there will get involved, and you know, we'll look at some more detail along the way. Okay, Mr. Mayor.
All right. The workshop is closed. Thank you.